What is up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Just Mets podcast. I am Rich MacLeod, and you will see that I'm here solo this week. No Andrew Claudio here on the weekly recap show with me. You can blame or credit the New York Knicks for that. We will talk about that a little bit more later, but the New York Knicks ending their 53-year championship drought on Saturday night. Obviously, Andrew's other responsibilities than just Mets are with Knicks Film School. They did, I believe, a 9-hour and 40-minute post-game live stream last night / this morning, which took a lot out of that entire team. And Andrew's been, I believe, editing all day and preparing their post-championship coverage. So that is why I'm here by myself. Andrew does have a Mets therapy clip, which I will play in a few minutes on the show to just get some words from him. I haven't listened to it yet, so I'll be reacting to that as well to see what thoughts he has about the Mets and any Knicks stuff that he may or may not be sprinkling in. Talk about the Knicks a little bit more later, though. The Mets had actually a solid week, and it didn't look like it was going to turn out that way with how it started. This is another, I think, 2 weeks in a row that the Mets went 3-3, but they lost the first two games to start the week, and things were looking pretty bleak. They kind of got their shit handed to them for two games against the Cardinals on Tuesday and Thursday to open up the week, but they bounced back. They win in pretty convincing fashion in that last game against the Cardinals. And then they actually take 2 out of 3 against the Braves. And funny enough, the Braves, who won, are forever the Mets tormentors, even in years like last year where the Braves were awful and the Mets were, not good, but an above 500 team. The Mets still couldn't beat the Braves then. Not only that, of course, the Braves are the best team in baseball this year, and they're, 500 million games ahead of the Mets in the standings. I don't look at the standings at this point in this season with the Mets record where it is. But they take 2 out of 3 against the Braves this weekend. They win the rubber match here on Sunday. If you're with us live, we're doing this about an hour or so after the game ended. Braves are the only NL East team that the Nets have a winning record against so far this year, which is pretty funny. 2-1 against them. They're 3-3 against the Marlins. And I forget the exact record off the top of my head, but they do have a losing record so far against the Nationals through a couple of series there. Amazingly enough, it's June 14th when we're doing this episode. They haven't even played the Phillies once this year. That will, of course, come to an end a week from now. They do go to Philly this upcoming weekend. So they'll finally get their first look at Philadelphia. But yeah, overall, a solid weekend. I don't think a solid week. I don't think we're gonna have too much to break down. Overall, Andrew and I talked last week, and while if the Mets really want to get back into this thing in a meaningful way, playoff wise, eventually they're gonna have to string together some more winning stretches of baseball. But as they continue to not be whole quite yet as a team, and as their schedule dials up, having a couple of 500 weeks is definitely not a bad thing. It is much more, just treading water, which is an improvement for this team. And, I think we both signed up for a 3-3 week when we last met last Sunday. So having done that, and the one series you win is actually a series against the Braves, I do think is somewhat encouraging. Francisco Alvarez did come back this week. He was okay, but just nice to have him back in the lineup. Even though he can be a very hot and cold hitter, he's not become the offensive threat that was promised when he came up through the minor leagues. But he is an improvement to the lineup. It just helps deepen things. It helps Luis Torrens not get overexposed. It also just gives the Mets more options in the lineup so that they don't have to play Mark Vientos as much, who barely saw the field this past week. And when he did, he was largely not very good again. But I think he only had maybe 6 plate appearances in the last week. So his role is getting pretty whittled down. I believe the only time we really saw him start was Saturday against the lefty, which was naturally the one game that the Mets lost against the Braves this weekend. But yeah, Francisco Alvarez came back. Tobias Myers is coming back to the team for Monday against the Reds. So it'll be nice to have him back in the fold. And then we may be about a week or so away from Francisco Lindor coming back to the team. And I think that becomes your kind of line of demarcation for the Mets season potentially being back on. If this team can continue to tread water, have another 3-3, God forbid I say 4-2 week this upcoming week, and then you get Lindor back in the fold by late June, I think at that point you can say, all right, like let's see what they got here. Can they put any kind of thing together now that they finally, fingers crossed, will have their 2 best hitters in the lineup together, which they really, with Soto and Lindor, they really haven't played together since the first 2 weeks of the season, because Soto obviously injured his hamstring. And if you remember, the first game that Soto came back from the injury was the same game that Lindor injured his hamstring. So they really only got 4 innings together when that happened. And that obviously not a great sign from the baseball gods. But, the Mets are, 32 and 39 now. So still 7 games under 500. That's basically mostly been where they've been at for the last couple of weeks. Again, that's what happens when you are 6-6 over the last 12 games. They are 10-6 over their last 16. But if you go back further than that, it just continues to kind of be this 500-ish record. So again, they've played a lot better baseball since April came to a close. It's just going to have to get significantly better to dig themselves out of that giant hole that they've put themselves in. And so, if Lindor can get back here and resemble the player that we have been, accustomed to seeing over the years, and he's paired with Soto doing his thing, and hopefully, the rookies are playing well. AJ Ewing had a solid week. Bench kind of came back down to earth, but that's going to happen with these young guys. Hopefully get something out of Alvarez, and then, you kind of take it from there. But, overall, yeah, not a terrible week, not a bad week. Yeah, I see Armand in the comments said the same thing about Tobias Myers, that, yeah, he'll be starting their series opener against the Reds this upcoming week. Curious how stretched out he might be. Are they just going to make him a full-time starting pitcher at this point? Just because they've had to use so many openers, mostly because David Peterson, who I have a sneaking suspicion we will talk about later, has just done such an awful job this year. I know he's been better coming out of the bullpen in these bulk outings rather than starting, but overall just a disastrous season for David Peterson. And after how it ended last year for him over those last 8 to 10 starts. Yeah, Peterson is just one of the many guys that we've kind of ranted about this year, about their Mets world not having much time left, I guess. If you can't tell, by the way, my voice is pretty hoarse. I'm quite hungover. Again, this all connects to the Knicks. So if I'm a little bit discombobulated, I hope that you'll forgive me celebrating the first championship, or first professional championship I have ever seen in my 35 years being alive and being a sports fan since I was about 15 years old. So again, we'll talk about the Knicks a little bit more later, but it's been a whirlwind of the last 24 hours or so at this point. And I appreciate that the Mets didn't, the Mets could have lost 200-0 today, and I wouldn't have cared after what the Knicks just gave us last night. But the fact that the Mets, do take 2 out of 3 against the Braves and didn't completely ruin the vibes of the weekend, definitely was appreciated. And yeah, I mean, a good weekend, good week for the orange and blue New York teams. I think the Yankees had a pretty good weekend too, but we don't really care about that around these parts. But yeah, I want to go to Andrew's Mets therapy video that he sent me. These should have been posted across socials by now. Again, if you're joining us live, but I've not watched this yet, so not sure what he's going to say. But even though he is not physically here today, I do want to give Andrew that chance to share his thoughts. So let's go to that now.
Mets therapy. Andrew Claudio here. Game 71 of the Mets season is in the books. They defeat the Atlanta Braves 8-1. They've won 3 of their last 4. They take 2 out of 3 from the Braves this weekend. 8 runs, 13 hits today. The bats were awake. At least on Friday and Sunday they were awake. Last weekend we talked about Carson Benz. We're gushing about his 5 hits. Today we're going to gush about AJ Ewing and his 3 hits. The New York Knicks are NBA champions. And it's really hitting me in waves that's the reality I exist in right now. Top of the broadcast today, the SNY crew, Gary, Keith, and Ron, are congratulating the Knicks, and it's 2 1986 Mets welcoming the Knicks into this brotherhood, this circle of champions that have won here in the Big Apple, and what it means to go down the Canyon of Heroes and to enjoy that parade and the emotions from all the fans. You get Gary talking about what basketball means to this city and the city's game, as he's called it, and as many people have acknowledged. Even John Hamm gets interviewed and takes credit for all of it because of his Apple TV show, Your Friends and Neighbors, which is like a fun show. My wife just finished it this weekend. OG Anunoby is in that show. In that same scene OG Anunoby's in, so is Zach Lowe, fellow Mets fan, by the way. You may be a Mets fan that it feels so far away that the Mets will ever win a championship. I know they were in the NLCS 2 years ago, but I know this season's been very deflating too. And I think back to the lowest points with the Knicks and how far away it always felt. And if I can get biblical for a second, the definition of faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's Hebrews 11, chapter 1. And man, I no longer have faith in the Knicks winning a championship. It's not an unseen. I have evidence. That is a reality that exists. And as a result of actually seeing the Knicks win a championship, I have faith the Mets will do it one day. And if you're a Mets fan that somehow you're just not a basketball fan or not even a Knicks fan, I hope you get to experience this one day. I hope your faith is rewarded. Because damn is it sweet. Damn is this feeling sweet. On to Cincinnati and on to the Canyon of Heroes.
Well said, Andrew. Very well said. I will share the bulk of my Knicks thoughts for a little bit from now. I still want to hit on a couple Mets things first because though we jokingly call this the Just Knicks podcast at times over the last 2 months, this is still the Just Mets podcast, so I want to do that justice. But yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff, seeing the Knicks, it's almost too easy. I mean, if you're die hard like Andrew, like myself, you never truly forget, but sometimes you almost have to take a step back and just to remember how far the Knicks have come. Because 6 years ago, not that long ago, most of us viewed the Knicks the way that you currently view the New York Jets. And at times viewed the Mets for a while as well, specifically that period of time between the 2006 season and 2015, where they went 9 years without making the playoffs. Didn't really even get close outside of 07 and 08. They were just pretty awful and non-competitive. That's where the meaningful games in September came from, was that dark period for the Mets. So for the Knicks, who have such a kinship with the Mets and the Jets, and if you're unlucky enough, I suppose, to be like me or Andrew or so many other fans who are fans of those three particular New York teams, it is very inspiring to see that it can actually happen. And even though if the Mets are going to win a championship in our lifetimes in the next few years, doesn't seem like this would be the year. Never say never. Doesn't seem like it'd be this year, but just to know that it is possible, I think that brings just some additional hope in general. I like to think, or at least hope, that it will change my viewpoint as a baseball fan, or as a sports fan, really. The Knicks exercised a lot of my sports PTSD this year. But it's still there, like last night I was, Matt Hederman, who is a great Knicks fan, is a big KFS supporter. He's thrown us some super chats in some recent episodes. Just hang out with him last night, and there's so many times in the first three quarters I was just like, they don't have the mojo tonight. Like, I wasn't going to the point where they were going to blow the series. It just didn't feel like the game was going to go their way. And that was just years and years and years of not just the Knicks PTSD, Mets PTSD, Jets PTSD, all the sports teams just telling me in the past, like, you're never going to win. It's not going to ever happen for you. And it gets ingrained in you. And I think seeing the fact that it actually can happen, it just opens that world of possibilities more, at least for me in my brain. And I think Andrew was saying the exact same thing in the video that we just played. So, do I think the Mets are going to win a World Series this year? No. Do I think they're going to win one anytime soon? Maybe not, but I don't know. It just feels more possible. All right, before we go fully into the Knicks, there are a couple more things I want to hit on here with the baseball team that we were talking about. We had a pretty significant anniversary pass on Saturday. Saturday was not only the day that the Knicks won their first championship in 53 years, but it was also June 13th, which is a year since the Mets, like, infamously began their collapse in 2025. It was on June 12th, the day before, that Pete Alonso had the high throw to Kodai Senga, who got injured. The Mets did hang on for dear life to win that game, but it all began to crash down that following day, which was a Friday last year, against the Tampa Bay Rays, where the Mets blew a 5-0 lead. They took Clay Holmes out of the game for Paul Blackburn, who promptly got shelled. The Mets get swept by the Rays. They wind up having this, as Gary Cohen put it, slow motion collapse over the course of the next 3.5 months to end the year. They missed the postseason by virtue of the tiebreaker, which they lost to the Reds. And it led to this offseason of very dramatic change. And coming into this year, it kind of seems like, despite so many faces changing in the dugout, on the field, at the plate, it almost feels like there has been a carryover effect to that. The Mets have now played 164 games since that June 13th date in 2025, where everything changed. And since then, this year and last year combined, the Mets have a 70-94 record. They are 24 games under 500 over the last calendar year, now plus a day. And that is just pretty remarkable. Ironically, June 13th, 2024, so a year before the Mets started collapsing last year, 2 years before this weekend. That was the day that Grimace threw out the first pitch and their 2024 season flipped the other way. So June 13th seems like it has some weird cosmic significance to this team for some reason. It's also my brother's birthday, so happy birthday, belated birthday to my brother Connor, who turned 30 this weekend. And I can now remember that his birthday happened on the day that the Knicks won a championship, instead of his birthday being the reason that the Mets fell apart in 2025, which I jokingly blamed him for a lot last year. Yeah, man, it's just kind of crazy. I don't know if, they did lose yesterday, so we haven't seen anything to signify something different, but does that June 13th date once again flip it back the other way, and the Mets just keep doing this thing where they can't be good. They can't be fully good or bad in a season. Whatever they start as for the first 2.5, 3 months, they will then do the opposite for the remaining 3 months. 2024, they were off to a horrible start. Flip it around in June 13th, when Grimace throws out the first pitch. Although their turnaround kind of started a little bit before that. They go the rest of the way, play really well. They make the playoffs by virtue of a tiebreaker on the final day of the season. Go to the NLCS. Last year, the complete opposite. They're the best team in baseball for the first 2.5 months, and then they completely fall apart, and they miss the playoffs by virtue of a tiebreaker on the final day of the season. This year, they got off to another horrible start. We'll see where they are. Right now, they are 7 games under 500. I did check the standings just so I could bring it up for the podcast. They are 5.5 games out of a playoff spot, which says more about the state of the NL East, and also not the NL East, the National League in general. And also just, with that last playoff spot, what the standings usually are going to look like in June. So mathematically, they are there. Again, they're going to have to play a lot better, and the rest of the National League outside of 1 or 2 teams is also right there. So they're going to have to jump a lot of teams. Obviously, they have time to do that, but going to need to see them play better. So, I don't know if this date has any real significance or not. But yeah, they've played 164 games since then last year, and 24 games under 500 since then is really bad, considering not just the expectations, but the money and the resources that have been poured into this team. The very smart people who are supposed to be in charge. This kind of thing shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't continue to be happening. We do need the Mets to get consistent here. So, it's take what you will from that, I suppose. But yeah, we're now a year out from that infamous date, and I hope that things can turn the other way. Couple of comments I wanted to bring up. Not a huge amount today with the post-Nick glow. I'm sure a lot of people similarly like me are either watching nonstop Knicks coverage and content on the internet, listening to the radio, all that stuff, rewatching the game from last night. I did that this morning, or are sleeping or hungover, or maybe laying outside. But a couple of comments here. Another one from Armand is amazing on this exact topic. Actually, Andrew is still drunk and high from the Knicks win. I think it's all a natural drunk and high. I don't think Andrew partakes very often. I've seen him drink alcohol like a very small handful of times over all these years. So not a big drinker or partier, but I think last night was so thrilling, and the last few months have been so thrilling that even if you don't, partake in any extracurriculars like that, you're just going off like this natural buzz and high at this point. And then we have this one from Brad, who says Jared Young is so much better in this lineup than Mark Vientos. Man, not to dismiss your comment, because I do completely agree with you. Anybody is better than Mark Vientos in this lineup. I would rather watch Eric Wagaman, who, full stop, I had barely ever heard of before this year. I'd rather watch that dude play over Mark Vientos. But Jared Young continues to be pretty solid for this team in the role that he's been filling. For as long as the Mets can get anything out of Jared Young, you just kind of take it. He went on Sunday. Jared Young went 1 for 5 with an RBI. Over the last week, if I can pull up the stats there, let's take a look at how Jared Young did. Player stats, Jared Young, not including Sunday's game because Fangraphs hasn't updated that yet. Jared Young went 3 for 16 coming into Sunday, went 1 for 5. So he goes 4 for 21. So not super great. It's a sub 200 batting average. He did hit a home run. He's brought a little bit of pop to the lineup, which I can appreciate. Again, he just also prevents Mark Vientos from playing very often. So I appreciate him for that. And look, you went into this year expecting nothing out of Jared Young. I don't even think a lot of us wanted him to make the team. So the fact that you're getting literally anything out of Jared Young at this point, like, I'll take it for as long as I can get it. And I'd rather watch him hit than Vientos. To Armand's point in the chat, I'd rather watch Victor Wembanyama try to hit more than Vientos, although he seems to have a better time making contact with Jalen Brunson's face than probably a baseball, but that's a whole other thing. All right, let's jump into our segments as we move along here. So curtain call, we obviously do this every week for a person or player who does so well that we want to give them a curtain call. I think the one from this past week is pretty obvious, and I'm going to give it to a guy that we've been very critical of on this show. Again, I think rightly so. But Bo Bichette, he had a really good week, man. Bo Bichette goes 7 for 25. That's 280 batting average. He had 3 home runs, including a grand slam. He had a 2 home run game against the Braves on Friday where he hit a solo home run in the first and then a grand slam in his second at bat. Really helped the Mets kind of beat up on the Braves on Friday and set the tone for that series. He hits 280 for the week, 3 home runs. He hits a double, which is also nice to see. Drives in 8 runs. 5 of those were in the one game, but still was overall productive. He also scored 6 runs. Bo Bichette, overall, he's just also looked better in the last couple of weeks. Again, we've seen these starts and stops from him before, but what we were talking about at the top of the show was about, if by the time Lindor gets back, if him and Soto being back together can help kind of spark some sort of a run for this team. But Bo Bichette falls into that group as well. If Bo Bichette can actually finally get in on the action here and put more consistent at-bats together for longer than a week at a time, and those other 2 guys are humming as well, that really does change a lot for this team. And you would finally be able to see the vision when David Stearns and the team was, being built over the offseason this way. So Bo Bichette, yeah, we've given you a lot of grief over the season, but very good week. Please keep hitting for power. That's a huge thing. Like the Mets, it's just been in short supply for the Mets. I mean, hitting in general has been in short supply, but especially the extra base hits have not come super often for this team. So it's very much appreciated. On the other side of that is the El Stinko. And the El Stinko, by the way, of course, is our weekly segment where a player or person who does a really bad thing, makes Keith Hernandez say in the booth, like, "Oof, that's an El Stinko. That's an El Stinkowski," is another favorite Keithism of mine. While I was very tempted to give it to Victor Wembanyama, who we just mentioned, and I will probably mention again in the next in a couple of segments from now, I'm going to again keep it in the spirit of the Mets. and try not to make this too basketball centric of a show. But I got to give the El Stinko to a guy that I feel like I've given it to a lot this year, and it's David Peterson. David Peterson made one appearance in the last week, goes 3 2/3 in one of these, classic bulk bullpen outings in a game that had an opener. 3 2/3, 6 earned runs, 1 strikeout. It's a solid, sexy 14.73 ERA on the week for Peterson. Overall, the numbers on this season, let's pull these up real quick for Peterson. They're not good. 5.75 ERA, negative 0.8 BWAR. Boy, that is bad. Let's see if the F4, which is Fangraphs, is any more generous to him. Wow. Okay. For those who have gripes with the WAR system and the fact that, we have different WARs for different websites because they get calculated differently. The two main ones are BWAR for Baseball Reference's WAR system, and then F4, which is Fangraphs. On Baseball Reference, David Peterson is a minus 0.8. On Fangraphs, he is a plus 0.9. So that's almost a 2-win difference based on the two different website evaluations. I don't know that I've seen, you see differences when you look at guys through that. I don't know if I've ever seen that wide of a gap for one player. So that's interesting. That all being said, David Peterson's been fucking dog shit this year, and he continues to be dog shit. And I mean, honestly, is this one of the worst contract years you've ever seen from a guy? This is a guy who looked like he, maybe not a true ace, but, had that top half of the rotation workhorse vibe from what he showed you at times late in 2024 when he came back from his hip injury. And then through not even half of last year, I would say more like 75% of last year, this guy was going 6, 7, 8 innings routinely. You could count on him to go deep into games and be really effective. And he just looked like this lefty workhorse who had really, transformed his career after getting that surgery. And since, I want to say mid August is when the wheels really fell off for him. It's just never been the same. He is awful to watch. It's like watching the worst version of Steven Matz, and it's been that way for, not a year at this point, but it's a while. We're like 10 months into this at this point. David Peterson, you big fat El Stinko, not just for this week, for this entire season. I don't know that we've given it to someone as many times as we've given the El Stinko to David Peterson. Bo Bichette might be up there. Marcus Semien might be up there. But I feel like Peterson, with the amount of just uncompetitive horseshit outings that he's had, whether it's out of the bullpen or as a starter, yeah, he takes the cake. And I mentioned it at the top of the show. He's not long for this Mets world, whether, maybe they let him ride out the string of this year, but I could see them maybe flipping him for somebody at the deadline, whether the Mets are buying or selling, just to be like, hey, like need for a need, project for a project. Maybe some other team feels like they can fix him or put him in a different role or just have a change of scenery. I see no way that the Mets re-sign David Peterson at this point. And, even if he closed the year strong, I feel like he would have to show you so much over the next couple of months for you to even consider bringing him back. And nothing tells us that that's going to happen. So yeah, David Peterson, El Stinko, man, like get it together. I've had enough. All right. Weekly predictions. I will gloat a little bit more since Andrew's not here, and it feels a little rude to gloat to his face, and somehow less rude to gloat behind his back. Although, maybe he'll listen to this later. I won again this week. It came down, I think this is the third week in a row that it's come down to the last game of the week on Sunday to determine which of us was going to win. I went with 3-3 on the week. Andrew went with 2-4, which I think is what we've gone. Those have been our picks, I think, for the last few weeks at this point. I did with the Mets victory on Sunday, pretty convincing win over the Braves. I won for the 10th straight week. I'm now 10-1 on the year. Andrew won the first week, and I've won every week since then. So I get to go first. We discussed this via text earlier this afternoon so that we could coordinate on this. So let's talk about the games they're playing first. So the Mets play 3 games in Cincinnati against the Reds. It's the second and last time they'll be seeing the Reds this year, unless they somehow both made the playoffs, which I highly doubt at this point for both of them, honestly. 3 games in Cincinnati. They go to Philly and play 1 game on Thursday, then have Friday off, which I assume they have the game off for Juneteenth, but generally unusual to see an off day that's not not the first series of the year in the middle of a series. So they play game 1 in Philly on Thursday, off on Friday, and then they finish the series out on Saturday and Sunday. So 6 games, 3 in Cincy, 3 in Philly. It's boring at this point, but I'm going to keep playing the strategy, and I'm also just going to keep picking what I feel, and 3-3 yet again feels pretty achievable and pretty in line for what this team has been the last month and a half at this point, which is a 500-ish, maybe even slightly above 500 team. I guess, they are 4 games above 500 since about the end of April. Not ready to go with a 4-2 week because they're going to be on the road. And, the Phillies have been playing much better than them. The Reds beat them 2 out of 3 a couple of weeks back. But I'm going to go 3-3 again. And Andrew is going to continue to do what he has been doing, which, hasn't quite been working out for him. But he's going with the 2-4 record on the week. So we will find out in next Sunday's show who wins that. Maybe Andrew will break the streak. We'll see. I mean, look, the Knicks won a championship, so anything can happen. And with that, we will officially transition to Just Knicks, which I have alluded towards a lot in this episode. And honestly, I don't even know how to process this and what to say. The Knicks won their first title in 53 years on Saturday night. Game 5 against the Spurs, they come back again from down 16 points. They came back down from 29 points in Game 4 at Madison Square Garden, which I still can't even wrap my head around that, let alone the fact that a professional sports team that I root for just won a championship. I've never seen that. I am a Mets, Jets, Knicks fan. My Rangers fandom has gone in and out over the years. There's some years that I'm much more into it than others. I was 3 years old when they won the Stanley Cup in 1994, and I didn't start watching sports really until I was 15. So I've never seen a championship, and I have been so deeply entrenched in the feeling, and not even a feeling, to me, it was a certainty of I will never see a championship. I've seen some with college, with UConn basketball, and those have been fun and emotional, and they do mean a lot to me, but it is not quite the same. And, following these 3 teams the way that I do over all these years, and all the heartbreak and devastation and those moments where you finally think, oh my God, maybe this is the year. Maybe it really is going to happen. Those are always followed up with one of the most painful things you can ever imagine. The Mets in 2015, when they won the pennant, and they are up going in, they take the lead late in game 1 of the World Series because Eric Hosmer boots a ball at first base with 2 outs and a run scores. And when has that ever happened for the Mets in the World Series? And you start to think, oh my God, the magic's on our side. I'm finally going to see it. And then Jay Reese Familia throws a quick pitch and the game is tied and they lose in extra innings and they blow a lead in game 2 and get blown out. And they blow a lead in game 4 in the 8th inning, thanks to a Daniel Murphy error. And they blow a lead in the 9th inning in game 5 because Terry Collins stuck with Matt Harvey for a batter too long. And because Lucas Duda couldn't make a routine throw to home plate. And they go to extra innings and they get blown out and the magic was over. Last year with the Knicks, they get to their first Eastern Conference Finals in 24 seasons. They're up 14 points with 3 minutes to go against the Pacers, who they owed one for what happened the year before, who they owed one for what happened in the Melo year with Roy Hibbert. And they owed one for a lot of what happened in the 90s before I was a fan. They were favored in the series. They were favorites to go to their first finals since 1999. And they have the worst collapse I've ever seen in a sports game other than 28-3 for the Falcons and the Patriots. Tyrese Halliburton has a shot that goes off the rim, bounces 30 feet straight into the air, and somehow comes back down and goes through the hoop. And they go to overtime, and despite having the lead with under a minute to go, the Knicks blow it again. They run out of gas. They lose the game. They lose game 2. They lose game 4. And they lose game 6. And they get got again by Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers. And you just sit there and you think, man, I really felt like this was the year. And it feels like we just completely missed the window. The 2010 Jets beat the 14-2 Patriots in one of the greatest sport wins of my entire life. You have all the confidence that they're going to beat the Steelers on the road the next week and go to their first Super Bowl since 1969, when my dad was months old. And they're down 24-0 before you can blink. They come all the way back, and they're within 1 third down stop, and you're fully believing we're about to make the Super Bowl. And they can't get a hand on Roethlisberger, and Antonio Brown makes a diving catch, and the season ends, and the Jets haven't made the playoffs in 15 years since. Every time I've felt like my team was on the precipice of maybe finally overcoming all of these years of pain, the second that hope starts, the worst thing I've ever seen generally has followed. And what the 2025-26 Knicks have just done is erase all of that. I was so afraid to believe so many times, and every time they proved me wrong. They proved all of us wrong. And the emotions I've always wondered what I would feel like if I ever experienced a championship. And I don't know that it's been what I expected. It was very emotional. There's obviously a lot of yelling and celebrating and running around the city last night, but the emotions since then have been very up and down. There are times where I've cried and I've felt the chills, and there are other times where it just doesn't feel real. Most of the time, I think it's just been this surreal feeling, and I genuinely can't believe it. I can't believe that one of my teams won a championship, and I wish Andrew was here to talk about this with, but we've been texting, and I'm sure we'll reminisce about it when we are on the show again together next weekend. But this is so special, and something I didn't expect, despite the expectations for this team coming into the year. And it's been amazing. I've watched so much Knicks content today, and will continue to do so. I've already bought my first of probably many purchases for Knicks championship gear. I got a shirt that'll be on the way soon. Looking for some other stuff. I didn't love the hats, but there's some other hats that look kind of cool that I'm trying to see if they have them in stock anywhere. But yeah, man, really special. It's going to take some time for this to sink in. I'm going to see if I can attempt to take work off to go to the parade. TBD on that, because that's happening this Thursday. But yeah, last night being in a packed bar a few blocks away from MSG. It was Knicks Film School watch party, by the way. Shout out to them, and shout out to Knicks Film School in general. I hope this won't sound like sucking up since Andrew isn't actually here. And again, I don't know if he'll listen to this later in the week or not, but not just the Knicks getting better in that We Here season when Julius Randle had the year that he did, but Knicks Film School really did reignite my Knicks fandom, where I watched and followed every year, but it was so dark for so long. I was so apathetic. And I had known Andrew a little bit from some interactions and podcasts we had done years before. So I was somewhat familiar with what was going on with KFS. And when the Knicks started to play a little bit more around 500 later that year, I started flipping on, their post-game streams, which at that time were not much of a thing on YouTube for sports content. Now everybody's doing it. At that time, it wasn't nearly as common. And, I started getting into it and getting into the games more. And then the team went on this big winning streak that really pulled me back in a way where I have not been, anywhere near as far from them ever since. And yeah, the Knicks playing better is a huge part of that. But honestly, like what Andrew and John and all the guys over at Knicks Film School do and have done is a huge part of why, I feel like I'm was fully able to have my fandom get reignited. So shout out to those guys. Check out everything they're doing. Like literally like 10-hour live stream they did last night. I think they're live again right now, which I will tune into once I wrap this up in a few minutes. Just recapping everything that happened. But shout out to those guys. And yeah, being in a full bar surrounded by my Knicks fans. Played that too early. Cheering, jumping up and down. We were back to back, which I'm not a huge crowd person, but for that kind of event, I had to be, and it was amazing. It's something I will never forget. And the clip that I accidentally started playing too soon, I just want to share for a moment, because just a bunch of New Yorkers covered in alcohol because people threw their drinks up in the air the second that the buzzer went final, which was honestly at that point completely fine with me. But me and hundreds of my closest strangers singing New York to New York, New York together right after the Knicks ended their 53-year title drought was really special. Man, what a night. What a night. All right, I'm going to wrap up Just Knicks, and I'm going to wrap up the show. I will say it just makes me think of how I would react for a Mets championship, a Mets World Series, and it would be off the charts. I love the Knicks. Knicks Mets and Jets, they're all pretty weighted equally in my sports fandom, but the Mets were my first love and my first sports heartbreak as well. So I can't, everything I'm feeling now, I feel like would be even more amplified if I did ever see the Mets win. So, man, I don't want this feeling to end with the Knicks, and I just want more of it with my other teams. And hope is abound right now, and maybe the Mets can turn this thing around. I don't know. Crazier things can happen. The New York Knicks are world champions. Anything can happen. All right. Thank you guys for joining another edition of the Just Mets podcast. If you're watching on YouTube and you like the show, please make sure to like and subscribe. Hype the video. If you're watching on mobile, all that stuff helps us out a ton. Definitely, if you're listening on one of the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those, please make sure to download, to subscribe, to give us a 5-star rating and review. Again, these things just really help us in all of the algorithms and everything as we try to grow the channel and just do more and more Mets content as the year goes on. We will be back with some sort of midweek show later this week. We didn't do the one this past week with all the Knicks stuff that was going on. Scheduling just got too difficult. Not sure if Andrew or I will be hosting this week. We'll figure that out. But we will be back with a midweek show this week, and then we'll both be back together next Sunday. Until then, in the words of the immortal Jesse Itzler, go New York, go New York, go.